Hello, welcome to QTV. I am Muhammad Mboj. This is a special program. It's a shibboleth, really, of our time, that public participation in government budget decisions, what taxes to levy, what services to provide, and how much debt to take on, strengthens democracy and governance, and promotes transparency and accountability, and so on. And in our age now, it is particularly important in the global context of what they call the democratic deficits and dwindling trust in politicians and political institutions. But again, nobody should be surprised there. In a recent survey, 4 out of 5 of the 117 governments assessed failed to reach the minimum threshold for adequate budget transparency and oversight. So today, on this program, we are going to review the Gambia's participatory budget process and discuss the significance of open budgets. And I have here to help me, and perhaps I should add, this is a Gambia Participates program. Gambia Participates, the budget advocacy and anti-corruption watchdog. In fact, I have here the founder and executive director, Mr. Mariam.
Thank you, Mr. Mboj.
That's it. You're welcome. And on my left here, I've got the president of the Gambia Press Union, Mohamed S. Bah, popularly known as MS. Welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure having me.
That's it. So, Mar, let's begin with our topic, really, isn't it? Review the Gambia's participatory budget process, which means that there is a participatory process which we are reviewing. Give us the profile.
So yes, there is existing participatory budgeting that is currently taking place. If you look at the central government level, the Ministry of Finance this month, a couple of weeks ago, they held a participatory budget session with different sectors to discuss about the budget before the formulation of the 2023 budget. And then also, we've seen KMC recently taking participatory budgeting in another level where they have already, I think that's the best practice. I think they are the leading institution that are doing participatory budgeting in the Gambia. So they have a scheduled list of communities that they will be going to, the time and the places where they will have in this discussion for their upcoming budget. But also the ministries, some ministries, before the formulation of the budget, they will go to the communities, engage with the local councils, and sometimes selected number of people to discuss about the needs of the community before the formulation of the budget. That is participatory budgeting, but limited participatory budgeting. So the best practice is the citizens will have unlimited access, unlimited participation in the way the formulation of the budget is done, and then most importantly as well, in the approval process of the budget, before the budget is approved, the parliamentarians will be able to go to their constituents, explain the executive budget proposal, and most importantly, listen their constituents, their feedback before the budget is approved.
That's it. We'll go to different stages, isn't it, of the budget and see how participatory looks like in action. And there, yes, talking there about the ministry, sort of forming a kind of consultative forum. Were you part of these consultations on one night? Does it work that way?
Not actually. I think the idea, the intention is good, but the approach probably should be strengthened.
You mean the consultation forum idea is good?
No, I mean the idea is good,
yes,
but the approach is not the best. Sometimes what happens probably with these departments or ministries, they will reach out to a community through the chiefs, and the chief will just say, okay, or the alcalde will just say, yeah, just come around. Sometimes it has to do with having some tokens for the participants who are coming, so you believe maybe family members or those that you know are the ones that are privileged, so you just give them the chance. So I think the approach should be diversified. People should have access to this, and it should be in a way, in a very structural format, and it should have a legal footing, because there is no legal backing.
That's one of the.
It should have a legal footing. For instance, in Uganda, in Kenya, they have it in their constitution. that the budget should be tabled before, 6 months before. And then it will give the chance for the ministry to do their research, their engagement, people will engage, civil society, and then you will know that there is something happening. And then after that, the National Assembly members will go back after the tabling. They will go back and look at the priorities, whether what the ministry is telling them is the priority of the people on the ground. You understand? So it should have a legal backing. So for Gambia, we just have it, okay, it is there, but if you look at the legal aspect of the budget, the budget formulation process is too elitist. From the budget framework to the bilaterals, to maybe some stakeholder involvement, because it doesn't even have that legal, explicit legal provision to show that there should be a stakeholder engagement. You understand? They can just do the bilateral, after the framework, the bilaterals, present it to the cabinets take it to the National Assembly. And the National Assembly, could you imagine, they just have 2 weeks in the Constitution. So how can you dilate on a budget and how can you know the priorities? So I think these are the challenges. It's good, the intention is there, but I think we have to strengthen it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Matt here, one statistic I saw was really quite horrifying. We scored, what, 4 on transparency? I mean, 4 out of 100. that's extraordinary. So then I wonder, can we discuss here participatory budgeting, going through the different phases, you know, from formulation to audit, as it were?
Yeah. So yes, in 2019 we scored 4 out of 100 in terms of budget transparency, 9 out of 100 in terms of public participation. But in 2021 it has increased to 35 out of 100 in terms of budget transparency. But still, public participation in the budget is still 9 out of 100, which means that there is limited opportunity until today for public to participate in the budget process, as reported by the Open Budget Survey. So okay, to answer your question regarding the different phases of public participation in the budget. First, it has to start with the budget framework. In our case, they call it the MTF, the Medium-Term Economic Fiscal Framework. That is the foundation of which the budget is being built. And then it's normally a 5-year plan, which is annually updated. When developing that particular framework, the citizens will be able to have a say, because any subsequent budget that are going to be built, normally it will reflect on that of the budget framework. One will say, okay, we have an NDP, National Development Plan. The budget also communicates with the NDP, the National Development Plan, and one could also argue that the NDP, when it was being developed, was consultative. And right now, there's also what they call the LTDV, which is succeeding the NDP that they are developing, engaging different stakeholders in it. But the budget framework here, before its development, the citizens should be engaged in it. The stakeholders that are responsible for the drafting of this particular framework should be able to, in different sectors, the Ministry of Agriculture should be able to go to the public, health, education, and you name it, to understand what are the priorities of the citizen. Because you cannot obviously sit in your office and then know what the priority of someone else in Buduk is. So you need to, before you give them a fish pond, maybe their key priority is to have a standard health post in their community. So for the citizens to be able to realize that they need to be participatory, there has to be a participatory process in the development of that particular framework. So that's the first stage. The other stage also is the formulation of the budget. When the budget is being formulated, the ministries develop their proposals and they budget it, and they will send it to the Ministry of Finance to do bilateral, and then it goes to cabinet until it is confirmed, then they table it at the National Assembly. Some ministries, like I said in my intro, will go to the communities, engage limited number of people, like Emma said. They will engage, they will call their point of contact in those communities, but they will just select limited number of people and then engage. Open budget means the citizens that receive the end product of the budget should be able to decide how the end product should look like. So it has to be open, just like what KMC has started doing this year. you need to first communicate where the event is going to take place, but also the time, and then also the topics that should be discussed. So the citizens comes in and then give you an input. But most importantly, you don't only give them that opportunity for them to give you your input. The best practice is once you go back, you look at the feasibility of all the inputs that have been received, and then you take the most, because government also deals with revenues that are available to sponsor government activities or government budgetary activities. So you look at the most urgent or you reprioritize from the priorities, and then communicate to the citizens back. Okay, these were some of the priorities or your inputs that you have given us regarding this coming fiscal year. But based on our resource envelope, this is what we can finance. So the citizens are able to know that these are the areas that the government will be financing. So that is at the formulation process. Now, going to the approval process, the National Assembly, once the budget is tabled, like Emil said, currently our legal framework gives limited time to the National Assembly to review the budget, talk less of engaging the public on the budget. I know the draft constitution attempts to do that, but it was thrown in the trash. But the best practice is once the budget comes to the National Assembly, before the National Assembly considers it, they should go to the community. Each parliamentarian should go to their constituent and then tell them that this is what the executive is proposing. Now, they will have to outline the social issues, social and development issues that is of interest to the citizens, because the citizens, you might want to bore them with billions of, all they wanted to know is some of the development that the executive is proposing. And some of the social, or should I say public services that the government is also proposing. Now the citizens will look at that and they start making recommendations to their parliamentarians. So that's the reason why they call the National Assembly the House of Representatives. You are not there for yourself, but you are representing a whole constituency that puts you in there. So you are now speaking based on what your constituency has, how to call it, advised you, although you sometimes use your expertise and concerns in it.
That's it. So we'll come to that. Let me just bring in MS here. The formulation, isn't it? I mean, journalists, you're like, you've got this sort of interlocutory role, as it were. You bring down the ideas to the people. That's how they understand. That's what they understand. So how do you see the role of journalism in this sort of this point of formulation, as it were?
It's very important. Journalists should even set the agenda. It should be, for them, it has to start even. It should be year round, all year round. You know, for instance, you know, journalists should expose some of the needs and aspiration of the public, you know, with regards to social amenities, services, among other things that they need. So journalists should set the agenda. I think it's important that, but though now we are seeing a lot of public finance reporting with journalists, you know, there was a time it was very minimal, but now even myself, I've reported a lot on the budget, you know, deficit financing, among other things. So journalists should do that. Another thing is journalists should interrogate some of the policies. For instance, the National Development Plan, and align it to some of the realities on the ground, and also even the education policy, whether the budget is commensurating with the education policy. For instance, if government says in the next 5 years there will be TVET all over, is that the reality, looking at the trend, the budget trend? If government says that there will be free education for people in the next 2 years, you know, I've seen today that minister is saying there will be loan. They will start issuing loans, student loans. I don't know how they will do that. So these are the things for journalists to trigger intellectual conversation, expert conversation around it. Look at those involved, the case, sources, who are directly affected. You look at the stakeholder sources. What are their role with regards to the issues and these policies? You know, whether the budget, because without the budget, government will never succeed in their policies, implementing their policies and programs, because the budget is there to make it happen. So, and also, the media should keep track from the budget framework paper. You know, the media should also trigger discussion around the framework paper, whether it's realistic, because it is a 5 years thing, whether government has changed the realities, looking at the economic trends, the economic shocks, the global realities. For instance, the Ukraine war with the Russian, problem, the skyrocketing of the basic commodities. Is there any change in the framework paper? Even how those governments came up with those facts. Is it a fact or is just a fiction or so? These are the conversations that the media should really trigger. And another thing is the priorities. You understand? Look at the priorities. Government prioritized debt services than any other item because it's number one. And we have to trigger the discussion around it because every year is going up. If you look at the development budget and the recurrent budget, there's more.
Absolutely, but here, MS, I'll push a little bit.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that perhaps those things are a bit more technical? It is more, you need perhaps an economist. Even them, they will perhaps be arguing amongst themselves. In other words, what's the role of the journalist? I'm not necessarily a technocrat, but they just said that according to this view, this is it. According to the school of thought, this is it. Even there, you have people
but the media should provide that divergent and dissenting opinion.
Absolutely.
You know, obviously. And not only the technicians, but also talk to people in Sarajevo, what they need. Talk to people in URR, NBR, like Gambia Participate used to do very good analysis with regards to like the 54 million. They did that, and it was good. Like, okay, this 54 million is going to the MPs, but in Sarajevo you can build 2 boreholes, in this you can build, so that people can relate to this information. And also, the journalists, as I said, it should be a continuation. First, you get to the people, you set the agenda for government to know that, hey, in URR, these are their priorities. This is what is happening. In CRR, how will this year's government policy with regards to the fertilizer, how is it going to affect food security or food insecurity? Is farmers having that access to fertilizer? Because I saw that some people are even selling it to $2,600. So these are the things, kind of stories. And also even engage citizens on the budget itself, whether they know the budget, how it impacts their life. Because it's citizens who are funding the budget through their taxes. So these are the things that we should be doing. There are a lot of things, even the audit report, is part of the budget execution after the government, spend the money. The budget, the audit will come and see, this is $1, see, it goes there, this is how it's supposed to be spent, it is spent on that. Media should discuss on that, whether government is spending on the right.
So these are the things that we should be doing.
Exactly.
Interesting. So here are we, so that's very important there. The skills, you need the communicators, media, to have the skills and competence. Here you have to translate expert knowledge. There is so much and it's complex. It depends on how you report it. You don't want to put people off. As it were. So you have all of that. When you survey the media, how would you rate the reporting of participatory budgeting, for instance? Or because you are really committed to the wider idea of having good governance and the like. How do you think these sensitive issues are sort of reported generally?
The issue on reporting on participatory budgeting process here, I have not come across any report from the government that is telling the public that we have received your inputs on the budget and then now this is what we are going to be able to finance based on the inputs that we have received from the budget. So I think participatory budgeting process in the country is very weak. As survey results have said, 9 out of 100 is really you know, a shocking revelation. But we've seen now the government is starting doing it. We have been doing it with support from the International Republican Institute since 2017, I guess, taking parliamentarians to their communities, because we know once the budget is stable at the National Assembly do not have enough time to engage their constituents. So we take them to their constituents to talk about the budget, and then also get to hear from the constituents their priorities. So when they go there, they can, when the parliamentarians go to the National Assembly, they can mainstream those needs or those voices from their constituencies. So sometimes one of the big issues is that you go to these communities, you do your pre-survey in a local way, ask people whether they in fact know that there's what we call a budget. They don't know the existence of a budget. So that tells you there is a big problem in terms of people understanding. In fact, some school of thought did say that if there is a participatory budgeting, it tends to increase government revenue, because once the people have their say on the budget, they tend to increase their participation in paying taxes, and they also tend to advocate for other people or other businesses to be able to pay tax, because they know how that money will be applied back to them. But if there's no participatory budgeting, there's always going to be that atmosphere of lack of trust from the public. We are seeing expenditure here and there, but they don't get to know. In other countries, they will have what they call a city town hall meeting, where the mayors will face their constituents directly to talk about some of the pressing issues. In fact, during the execution of the budget, there also tends to be, there's also what we call participatory budgeting in the implementation, because priorities changes, right? During the COVID-19 2020 budget, we didn't know that there's something called we don't know there's going to be something called COVID-19 pandemic in the Gambia. So what the government was planning at the time, they had to change their plan in, I guess, March 2020 by reprioritizing the budget. So that's how also the citizens are, because right now if you go to Banjul during this rainy season, their main priority is about the issue of flood. So people's priorities tend to change, and it is also the responsibility of the government to address the needs of the people. You cannot also really address everything, but as the priorities keep changing, you wanted to first go to the public, engage them, get to know what their needs are, and then come back and then see what you can address in that. So I think that's what helps government in spending wisely. If you bring in a project that is not taken seriously by the community, you are doing what we call a wasteful expenditure. But the moment the public have been engaged, in fact, in the introduction of these projects in our communities, you go to some communities, there is a government project that the community is not actually taken seriously, because in the designing of the project, they were not there, and most importantly, it is not a priority of the community. So this is what participatory budgeting does. It helps government to spend wisely, but also helps in government to be able to increase the living standards of the people in the community by using state resources wisely to invest in areas that are of interest to the citizens. I keep saying, if we have a very robust and participatory budget process, the Gambia's 5 top problems will be able to be addressed within 5 years. Today, if you go to LRR and you engage the whole of LRR, right, and then you get them to vote, because with participatory budgeting, you can get citizens to vote into areas that are of priority. So if the people of LRR have chosen 5 big issues that of their major issues that have never been addressed, if it's the issue of road, education, health, agriculture, or access to water, once you identify these issues and the people have voted for it, now you get to ask from these 5 top issues, what is the most urgent one? If water is the most urgent one, then subsequent budget, you plus in money to address the issue of water. The issue that they've been suffering maybe since independence will be addressed within that particular, because you're able to know what the main priorities of the citizens of LRR are. Now in the other subsequent budgets, you do now the issue of education, road, gradually, until you are able to cover most of the issues. If not,
and then here it seems you will have to work with wards and councils a lot. That's directly
definitely,
isn't it?
Definitely. The ward councillors, the councils also have a very big role to play. I mean, if you look at the regions, most of the councils, their revenue is not that much, and I think in our law, government is supposed to support 25% of their developmental budget. Now they are receiving a subvention of $2 million. If you go to KMC, they are telling you monthly salary is about, is it $6 million is for monthly salary. Now, if you give a KMC $2 million, what are they going to do with $2 million for development? So also this of participatory budgeting comes to mind. This has to be collaborative between KMC and then that of the central government, going to the public and then get to understand what their priorities are.
Absolutely. Next, we're going to come to the significance of sort of having open budgets. But just perhaps one last provocative thought. Well, we've just said that we don't do much of a consultation. We do some, but perhaps not widely enough. Then which leads me to think, even the little that we do, what impact do you think it has on these people when they take decisions? It's one thing to go around canvassing ideas, quite another about how much I incorporate into the final document. And that matters. If people say that they're being ignored all the time, they'll stay at home. Yeah. What's your sense?
I think definitely, like you said, if people are not engaged, they tend to lack interest in national matters. So you also get to have a budget that does not get to meet the people's need. So the impact that it will have, it will be minimal. The reason most people do not have interest in the budget because they don't know what the budget is. They don't, in fact, know how their money, how they indirectly or directly contribute to the budget. So these are some of the things that we also try to do at different, I think we've covered all the regions in different communities, talking about how people can, in fact, if you go to this engagement, the moment you tell them about the budget, and then they will raise issues that you do not even know as a researcher, because it's a very vast issue. Once you, I mean, and I can give you one example in Banjul when we were there recently. One woman stood up and they said, look, if you go to the RVTH and then you are diagnosed and a medicine has been prescribed to you, when you go to the pharmacy, they will tell you the medicine is not there. But there is someone else in the pharmacy that can tell you, I have the medicine, I'm selling it. Yes. So these are some of the things that when the people engage with the ministries and their parliament in this, the ministries will be able to identify these issues, filter them and address it. If not, we would say Minister of Health, this and that. When the Minister of Health, in fact, is not aware of some of these corrupt practices that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And here, this is the question, then you move on, about the impacts that consultations sort of having on decisions, actually, the decision making, as it were.
Yeah, he made mention of one, which is people. It will enhance people's willingness to pay tax. If you look at our government local fund, maybe more than 30% is from tax. We can even say about 50% is from tax payment. So I think it's important. Citizens will also develop interest, even stakeholders. For instance, if you engage civil society and the business sector, like GCCI, and they give you their inputs on yearly basis, and they are not seeing any changes. If you come, even if they will participate, they will not give you their honest discussion. So I think it's important. So it will create that citizen participation. It will enhance tax payment, and also people will embrace like that sense of patriotism, you know, and nationalism will be instilled on them, that they will know that they are even useful to their country, that they are contributing towards national development. And what happened mostly is people just tick the box, you know, especially institutions. Okay, have you done participatory? Yeah, we've engaged civil society, we've engaged, but how much of those contributions are going into the budget is very important. I think it's not just participation, but, you know, participation in context. It has to be in context that we participated and then our points are noted and they are implemented. This is how it should be, you know, because if not, it will just be ticking the boxes. And it will also help government to understand the realities. Sometimes government's projection might not be, maybe it is just an expert projection or whatever, but to know the realities on the ground, because Mar just made mention of something during their engagement. You know, sometimes it's very interesting if you go to these communities. When I went to Galemanda, I saw the realities of Gambians living in abject poverty. I was like, wow, is this the Gambia? you know, a school that was built with just, you know, just grasses and whatever, trees and sticks, you know, children, after trying to link that from the 3 billion that is allocated to education, and now this is happening in the Gambia. So if you have that participatory budget, people can easily connect, you know. They will know that this is what government is doing, this is our entitlement, this is what we are doing. So it will bring that public trust. And another thing is, it will also develop that transparency. It will also develop a sense of accountability. And, you know, for us Africans, we like donations. We will have more donor confidence. You know, the people, the IMF, the name them, they will have more confidence to give more money, you know, because that is what our government is good at, getting money. But it's not bad, but build that confidence. And also part of they will be part of the open, is it open governance?
Open budget survey.
Exactly. And those international bodies that are well recognized. So you have that international recognition, you will also have the local respect for your people, and then people will have respect for the government.
I think you've touched on really the next question to Mar, the significance of open budgets in many ways. So do you see this to have such transformational potential? Expound on that.
Definitely. I think the significance of open budget is, is this. It helps government to first understand the basic needs or the most urgent needs of the people, and then invest in money to be able to address that. So what you are doing now, you are helping the government, or the government is helping itself to be able to invest wisely. And then also, what it does when you do open budget, like I said earlier on, people get to understand what the budget is. People are able to bring in issues that the government itself does not know. Most of these sectors are responsible for developing when I mean sectors, when I talk about sectors, I'm actually referring to the different ministries. They are the ones responsible for developing these issues. But if you are the Ministry of Health, and you might have people in all the regions, in all the constituencies, but you don't get to first understand the needs of the people. Today, if you go for the communities like Sarah Boja that he talks about, that only have one clinic day in a month, right? People that are sick sometimes will have to wait for a month to be diagnosed once they send in the nurses in there. So all of those expenditures that are going into that, and then also there's also a plan that is not sustainable. What is more sustainable? Maybe you get in the people, let the people now advise, or in fact share ideas. Why not in this particular district we have one clinic? So once you have that clinic, people do not have to struggle, and you don't also have to struggle sending in what's the name again? This mobile, nurses to be going from this community to another. And the citizens also do not have to wait for a month to be diagnosed. And if you look at the proximity of the nearest clinic is far. So what the significance of food budget is this: it helps the government to spend wisely and to address the most urgent needs of the people, but it also increases revenue collection. Most importantly, open budget also limits misappropriation of public wealth, because when the people get to know how government is expending money, and how these sectors are expending money in areas that are not of citizen priority. Now, once the citizens are engaged in it and they start making noise in it, they will be able to help the government to ensure public wealth are not misappropriated. And then allocation of budget is done in a way that it is more program-based than administrative. Because if you look at our recurrent expenditure from our government money, I think it goes all the way to 85%, meaning all 85% of our money is going into administrative costs. So 15% cannot really, 50% or more cannot actually realize development. So I think that's what open budget does. It opens up the eyes of the government to know the bigger picture. In our legislation, I think the only particular legislation that talks about participatory budgeting is section 222, subsection 15, which is the mid of, I consider it participatory budget because the constitution is saying the president will go and meet the people and then get to first finalize himself the policy of the effect of government policy on the people, but also to understand some of the needs of the people. But this has now been politicized. You go to a Meet the People store, you are politicking, you go to the Meet the People store, you bring in all of these ministers, but also is it participatory because you get to point out people.
Isn't that unavoidable to some extent, given that we've got this party political system, isn't it?
I think
party politics.
I think the money you invest in the Meet the People store campaigning could have been used. These are in hundreds of millions of dollars. This money could have been used to be given to the ministries. Now the technocrats, the permanent secretaries, the directors of different services go to the people and then have this open budget dialogue with the people. Now they come back and they report. But now if I have never seen any report from the Meet the People store.
Even myself,
so
I even want to say
that I think is a very bad practice.
Yeah.
I think it's an opportunity for politics, and I think it should be
and even the timing.
Absolutely, and something else. Then you will address that, but this thing first. So, open budget. But of course now the media, you see the conventional journalist, now you share the same space with bloggers. Here we talk about misinformation, disinformation. You see where you want to encourage transparency, accountability. You need to get the facts right. So you are also navigating in an extremely tricky.
Yeah,
is
I agree. That is why we are encouraging fact checking. I think that is the new norm of journalism, to moving it to the next level, and also investigative journalism. Fact checking, I think it should be. Every journalist should have the skills to do fact checking, because looking at bloggers, looking at even probably an institution can even have people who can send some propaganda stuff and then try to mislead people.
But isn't this the problem, though? Because perhaps with the journalists, you've got the training, there's that professionalization, whereas with the blogger and the rest of it, they're not really...
I understand, but fact checking also is another level. Not every journalist should be able to do fact checking, basic fact checking, but I think we have to do it in an advanced way. So that is why it's important that we have more capacity buildings on fact checking, and also help journalists to develop that culture of fact checking, because it's important. It's very vital to debunk some misleading information and help people to understand some of the information. Fact checking is very diverse. It's not only debunking, but also having fact sets. Like you can have a fact set that this thing, after doing our investigation, it is true, and this is why it is true. So it's important that journalists to develop that culture of fact checking. Looking at, I want to discuss on the importance of participatory budget. It helps government to have program-based budgeting. Now you will not bore yourself from bringing other formats of budgeting. You just concentrate on the programs. If this ministry was having more programs than the other, then next year, if the other ministry have less programs, you give less to the ministry, this ministry, and give more to the other. So this is why the advantage of program-based budgeting cannot be overemphasized. But here we don't have that. What we have is the same format, that if you have 10 million, even if you have lesser programs, but they have to add at least a bit, some kind of, additional. You must have, it's an increment form of budgeting system, where you have, okay, this minister, this year we requested for, or the resource envelope is 10 million, you increase. But if it is program-based budgeting, you look at the education department. After having $3 billion, we're having this failure in WAEC. What is the problem? Is it the resources? Is it the policies? What is the problem?
Yeah, but the permanent secretary said, it's not as bad as we've all been
but it's still bad. Out of the, the clarity, come on, out of, even if it is 5,000 versus 10,000, come on, that's bad.
Absolutely. We're coming towards the end.
I'm just giving an example so that you know this participatory budget is very important. Government should try it and see how best they can focus on program-based budgeting. We just, you know, change the style of budgeting since after independence, the First Republic, Second Republic. These are the things that we are having still.
Interesting, they're program-based. Yeah. I wonder if this might help implementation towards the end now. This is the problem, isn't it? Even with the media, sometimes you are accused of not following through, you know, giving feedback and the like. So this is really where the problem is. Implementation, how do we monitor it, and the auditing. All part of the process, isn't it?
I think, monitoring of the execution of the budget is also one key part. And also, this is why all the civil society, we need to have more civil society organizations that will be putting eye on the budget execution. In fact, if you go to the Ministry of Finance website, every single month they do publish what they call the monthly expenditure report. And they're looking at the expenditure variance against that of what has been allocated, and then to the different ministries. So I think part of our plan that we are trying to do is to ensure that the Ministry of Finance in their reporting are able to expand it, because right now what you will see is Ministry of Health expenditure January to March, and they will put the total. What we need to know during the execution of the budget is Ministry of Health, Department of Health Promotion, or the Department of maybe if it's a social survey, that if they're giving social survey, or in terms of medicines, how much money. So it has to be itemized so the public can get to know that this is what has been expended. So, but if you aggregate it at ministerial level, you are not able to monitor the performance of these different departments or agencies within that particular ministry. If the civil society and media are able to have that information, they will be able to in fact help the government in bringing issues into light, because so much expenditures that are being done, they are audited very lately. Right now, the most recent audit report is 2018. Now, if we are to look at that and then you want to rewind back for accountability, something else new pops up. So I think also part of our plans is to ensure that, to work with the government, to ensure the government finance. I mean, also don't get me wrong, the National Audit Office can only audit government accounts if the financial statements are available. So the financial statement, I think the accountant is the responsibility of the accountant general to ensure the financial statements are available for the NAO to be able to audit them. So the Ministry of Finance with the accountant general should make sure that the government financial statements are up to date, so that the audits can be up to date. And once the audit reports are there, now the issue of, the implementation that you're talking about, once some are being found guilty of misappropriation or certain recommendations are being made, that's where the Parliament comes in. The Parliament should also be proactive in ensuring that they keep going back to the recommendation of the NAO in their audit report and ask institutions whether they have been adhering to those recommendations. And if they don't, you can actually penalize them by cutting their budgets. You need to do better in terms of your budget administration for you to be able to get more money. And you also need to be able to give us impact stories in terms of your budget execution. So there has to be that standard of using KPI as a tool to monitor the performance of these ministries. In fact, with this assessment, you are able to identify whether you need to allocate resources in these particular departments or not. So that also helps you to spend wisely.
Yes, but here I want to be provocative again. Should we have budget voting? At least at that level.
No, definitely. I mean, that's what I was talking about.
Yes, ward council level.
You should be able to have, and I think I did mention this. Yes. If you do have this participatory budgeting, you go to regions or communities or constituencies, or let's say at the regional level, let the region be able to vote. Bring in the different councils and the civil society, community-based organizations, the women CAFOs, you name it, all facets of inhabitants in that particular region should be represented. Now, when you are identifying your key priorities, they should be able to vote. In fact, participatory budgeting encourages voting of budget allocation. So I think those are some of the things. I know this is new. What we are trying to do as part of our plans, I know People Powered have been supporting KMC in participatory budgeting, and they've been doing well. So as civil society here as well, we are also planning to take it to another level beyond KMC, and then also most importantly with the different ministries, especially Ministry of Finance. I think we've enjoyed a very good collaboration with them. But the interest here is to improve participatory budgeting and then also financial discipline and fiscal transparency.
Thank you very much. I think that should be a fine point on which to end this discussion. Thank you very much, Mariam of Gambia Participates, and MS Ba, MS. Cheers. Until next time, I'm much goodbye.